go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here today. My name's Emily Spranger. I'm an academic trainer in the Center for Teaching and Learning, and I am joined today with one of our very own, Dr. Marie Bakari, and Dr. Dina Samuels. A couple of housekeeping items I just want to go over with you. Our webinar is being recorded. We will post it in the CTL Webinars LibGuide page for future reference. If you'd like everyone to see your comments in the chat, please make sure you do select the everyone option in the dropdown. Otherwise, it just comes straight to the host and the panelists. If you'd like to see a scrolling transcript of this webinar, that is an option. If you click on your live transcript and hit show subtitle, you should be able to see that. We absolutely want to have an interactive session with you today. So get ready. We will have some polls. You would be able to speak and share some thoughts if you raise your hand at the appropriate times. Pop those questions in the Q&A and absolutely have conversation in the chat. We are excited to have our author, Dr. Dina Samuels, join us today, who serves as the Mindfulness-Based Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion author. She is a speaker, leadership trainer, and consultant. Dr. Samuels is an award-winning tenure professor who has taught at the University of Colorado in Colorado Springs for 20 years while consulting around the US and beyond. She now consults full-time on mindful, inclusive leadership development and remains on faculty at the university. Her latest book is The Mindfulness Effect: An Unexpected Path to Healing, Connection, and Social Justice. It offers 25 mindfulness practices for health, wellness, self-empowerment, culturally inclusive leadership development, social justice, and environmental justice. I am going to pop in the chat a link to her website, and I will do that again later on in this session as well too, because I know things can kind of get lost in the chat sometimes. But to start us off, I'm going to ask Dr. Dina Samuels to welcome us into this space. So Dr. Dina Samuels.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here. It's truly an honor. Dr. Bakari and Emily, I'm just thrilled to be here with you all today. I would love to spend a moment just welcoming us here. And I'd love to do that if folks are available, if it's available to you. If you're sitting down, if you could be walking somewhere or whatever, if you're driving, just be conscious of what I'm asking you to do and adjust accordingly, right? So I start off and say, if it's available to close your eyes, feel free to do so. If that doesn't work for you for any reason, you can keep your eyes open and just be conscious of your body, even at the same time that your eyes are hopefully, if you're not driving, they could be just gazed down gently. And so as you come into this moment, come into your space, come into your body with your focus, I invite you just to take a breath. And as you exhale, just allow your shoulders to come down a little bit away from your ears. Just notice how your body is right in this moment. Notice your belly, if your belly feels tight, if you're squeezing your abs in any way. If you want to try to release those on your exhales, that's always a great practice as well. And then on your next inhale, notice also that there's so much else going on in our lives at every given moment. We have so many things that are pulling our attention here, there, and everywhere. And as you exhale, see if you can just let those go. They'll be here right when you come back and when we're done with our time together. But that for this moment, we're going to just focus here into right now. With one more deep inhale here. And exhale together. And then if your eyes are closed, go ahead and flutter them open. And welcome here, welcome to this moment, welcome to this space, and welcome to our session together. I'm very excited. I also before we move in deeply into the session, I also want you to just notice to start thinking, I come from a social justice background. This is what I teach. This is what I do. This is how I live. And so I think it's important, if you're on United States land, to consider whose land you're on. What I say is, what stolen land am I on? And so I like to name that whenever possible. If you know the stolen land that you are on, please go ahead and put it in your chat. I am currently on Piscataway land. I just moved here last May. I'm outside of DC in Virginia, and it's Piscataway. So always great to bring that into the space, again, as a social justice practice, and to understand that we're not on land, we're on land that has been settled, that has been colonized, and it's important to keep that. So thanks for those who have included that. And if you don't know, by the way, whose land you're on, there's a really amazing app that is called Native Land. And you can download the app and click on it and put your, the area that you're in, and it will tell you right away whose land you're on. And I think, again, it's just an important practice to remember. Thanks.
Dr. Samuels, thank you for sharing that. I'd like to begin actually by asking Emily to launch a couple of polls for us. So Emily, would you launch the first poll, please?
Absolutely. And so that means attendees feel free to participate in this poll. The first question is, do you have a mindfulness practice? It's a yes, no answer. And I'm just going to give just a moment so everyone can participate that would like to, and then I will share the results in just a moment. Okay. We have about 90%. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll at this time and share the results. Can you see it?
Yes.
Great.
Awesome.
So it's about half and half, roughly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Almost there. And do you want to go ahead and do the second?
Yes.
Please. Thanks.
Absolutely. Our second poll, I'll go ahead and launch this now. So do you use your mindfulness practice daily? It's a yes or no. And I will wait just a few moments while people participate. And then I will share that. Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and share because we're about 85%. Share the results. So people that use their mindfulness practice daily.
Now that's interesting. But expected.
Yes.
Hi, well, thank you everyone for participating in that, because that gives us a springboard for our discussion today with Dr. Dina Samuels. So Dr. Samuels, could you begin by describing what mindfulness is?
And I love the question, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around it. There's some parts of our just in the United States, there's some folks who are tired of hearing the word over and over again, and may have misconstrued it as being synonymous with meditation. And that's not my interpretation of what mindfulness is. I have to honor where it came from. There's nothing new about mindfulness, right? It's been around, it's an ancient practice from Eastern philosophy, Eastern religions. And it's been brought to the United States mostly by people who look like me with white skin, who have typically kind of colonized the word. And yet at the same time, if you understand the root of it and what it's here for, it really, the idea is it's a beautiful social justice practice because it's accessible to every single person on the planet, and it doesn't cost a penny. So these are beautiful, beautiful reasons for the use of it. What it is, and again, when we think about meditation, meditation is really only one of many mindfulness practices. Most people, as I said, hear mindfulness, they think meditation, but there's so many ways we can be mindful throughout our day. And I'm not talking necessarily about just being a thoughtful person, because lots of people are thoughtful and they think, oh, well, I was mindful of, what I said or what I did. You may be thoughtful about that. Mindfulness has to do with being where your attention goes, right? It's being present in this present moment, right? Being here now. You've all heard that, being here now, as opposed to, we often think about our past or we think about our future, and those things can really cause a lot of stress in our lives. If we think, oh, I wish I had said this, or I wish I had done that in my past, or, oh, well, this is coming up, I don't want to forget to do X, Y, Z, or, I'm nervous about what's coming. And the idea is not that those things aren't important in your life, but that if we can focus on the present moment, this is really all we know is true, is where we are now. We can predict what might happen later in our day, but we don't know for sure. The only thing we know for sure is this moment. So the idea here is to focus on, what's happening inside your body, how your breath is in any given moment, and just noticing where your attention is. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's awesome. And thank you for explaining the difference between mindfulness and thoughtfulness. Really important there. So to continue, what do you consider the greatest physical benefit of mindfulness practice?
Yeah, so there's tons and tons of research now. There's, in fact, if you were to Google the word or look up, how many books or journal articles or whatever, Google Scholar, it's like 750,000 journal articles right now on mindfulness, which means it's just grown immensely. When I started this, when I started writing about it and researching it even more so, there was like 250,000 books, and it's grown so quickly. And basically, we know from a physiological standpoint, mindfulness practices are good for your brain, creating new neural pathways. It calms our parasympathetic system, which means it lowers your cortisol, which is your stress hormone. We know that mindfulness practices actually allow you to lead a calmer life. And so there is no end to what that means for any particular person's body, right? If you are in pain somewhere and you use some of these mindfulness practices, it allows healing to happen, oftentimes quicker than it would without that. So I could go on and on and on. And again, 750,000 research articles that show, what the benefits are. Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of research.
Mm-hmm.
So today, of course, we're joined by many of our students, and most of our students are working adults, and they have, like you said, very, very busy lives. So how do you believe mindfulness practices can help them as they continue along their learning journeys?
Yeah, it's this is really important in terms of the focus, our area of focus. So we actually think multitasking is a real thing. And people will swear, I'm the best multitasker, they'll say, I'm the best multitasker ever. I can do a million things at once. And I'm not here to tell you you can't. I'm sure that you can. When you look at the brain, however, you start to, when you study the brain, you start to realize that there really is no such thing as multitasking. Really what happens is that your focus goes very quickly from what you're doing to something else, to something else, to something else. And so your brain is kind of bouncing around, right? So when you have so much on your plate, you're not likely to be able to do every single one of them as well as you could if you were just focusing on the one thing. So even if you have 10 things going on at the same time right now, right, which we all do, you could probably name 10 things that are like, oh yeah, I'm doing this and doing that. You know, you're thinking about this, especially with social media. And even having the, you know, your computer, your phone or whatever accessing, you might be playing a game at the same time you're whatever. The idea is, where is your focus right now? And to notice that. So that practice of noticing, it takes practice, and we call it a practice on purpose, right? It's something that we practice noticing. Oh, I am, even if it's playing a game, I am playing this game right now. My focus and my attention is here, right? If you get an email at the same time, you stop playing your game and you go to your email, you take a breath if you want to, and you know, you or maybe you want to check something out on the news. Please take a breath before you look at the news, because it takes some calmness, right, in your body to actually be able to absorb what is going to be in the news. I've actually taken to, you know, I check the news very irregularly, maybe once or twice a day. I'm not a news junkie, and I was a politics major in college. So like that used to be what I did, and I don't do that anymore. I realized very, you know, long time ago, this is just not good for my health. And so, you know, and their goal is to sell papers, sell whatever, sell your attention, or buy, you know, to gain your attention. So if you know that going into it, you will be less likely to spend too much of your time there, if that makes sense. So you'll be cautious about it. Yeah.
That makes so
Absolutely.
much sense. Emily?
Oh, I was just going to jump in because someone in the chat, one of our participants, was saying, I really do not like multitasking, even though I have to do it. Someone mentioned, I do single tasking, say no when I can't, so I don't overcommit.
Love it.
Just some thoughts that are happening in the chat I wanted to share.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing, for folks who are chiming in too. And yes, single tasking is probably more accurate when you think about how our brains work, right? You could single task, like I said, a lot of things at the same time, but they're not really at the same time. They're out there, but where is our focus? And that's the mindfulness practice of figuring out, what are we focused on? And it turns out a lot of people, I hear this a lot of people will say, I don't have time to meditate, or I don't have time for mindfulness. And I'm thinking, if you understood mindfulness more holistically, you would understand that mindfulness actually increases not only our focus and our attention, therefore we're going to be more directed in the work that we do, but it ends up giving us more time. So that, you know, if you take a breath before speaking, what you say is going to be much more in tune with what you have intended to say. Does that make sense? As opposed to just blah, you know, speaking whatever comes to the top of off the top of your head. It's the same way with mindfulness. If you pause and you're focused, you're going to probably be a little bit more articulate in what it is you're saying. So think about that not only in your speaking, but in terms of what you're eating, or how you're interacting with other people, or how you're spending your time, you know, as a whole. Yeah.
Actually, your discussion has kind of raised a bigger question in my mind, and that is, how do we, in the age of all this technology around us, how do we get to a point where we can tear ourselves away from all of the technology and be able to put it aside? Because that in itself is actually, I think, the biggest distraction I have.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I think, you know, you're obviously not alone in that. If you go anywhere today, even to a restaurant, you know, you could have a table full of people and every single one of them is pointing down, looking at their phones. And you think, what is the impact here? You know, here you have an opportunity to engage with other people, and instead you'd rather, you know, engage with the technology. And so it really takes concerted effort. One of the things that I try to do is when I'm with another person, I just put my phone away. If I'm expecting a call, certainly I put it on vibrate and maybe check it just to make sure it's not somebody, it's not an emergency. But for the most part, I make it an intention. I set an intention to say, this is going to be tech-free time. The other thing, unless, again, I love the phone for emergencies. Like it gives me such a sense of peace to know that my daughter can reach me or my son can reach me if they need to at any, in the middle of the night if they need to. But otherwise, it's, I try to shut it down. I've told my friends and family, other than if it's not an emergency, that please, between these hours, please, don't call or don't expect me to respond during this time period. So some pretty, I would say some obvious things, but if we don't do these things, we don't do these practices, we can get caught up in that technology 24/7.
And I have to jump in here because there's a few things in the chat before we move on, Dr. Bakari, but someone just mentioned in the chat, had to check myself with putting my phone away just now. I feel like it's been more of a struggle with COVID too. So much dopamine and connection through phones.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And as you were saying, Dr. Samuels, it's about being mindful of your focus, right? And obviously this attendee's like, hey, I need to put this to the side because it's distracting me. I do have a question, if that's all right.
Sure.
One of the questions is, one of our attendees, Tanya, works with juvenile offenders as a mental health provider. And Tanya has introduced mindfulness into their therapy, but they are reluctant to practice or use the tools given. What are some of the best ways to get them to actively engage with this mindfulness?
So that idea of how do we broach the subject in a way that people are going to be able to receive it, I think is so critically important. This is true in the diversity, equity, and inclusion work I do as well. We call it sequencing, right? That if you start off and say, here's what we're going to do, this is what I want you to, how I want you to include it in your life. It really is, which I'm not suggesting that that's necessarily how this person is how you are introducing it. But I would say, asking the questions, is this something folks are familiar with to start off? What are your concerns about it? Do you have, is it something, some people will say mindfulness is woo-woo and it's against my religion. Like I've heard people say that before. And so I know if we stop there, that's all they're going to know about mindfulness, and they're not going to think it has anything to do with them, or it's going to be something they think this is not for me, right? They're going to avoid, or they're going to express resistance about. So the idea in general, if you're with a community, right now we're on a webinar, and we are trying to make it as engaging as possible. But if I'm in a room, whether it's virtual or in person with a group of people, I'll do a lot of the intro stuff, asking about their experience with mindfulness, what it means to them, what it, anybody in the room who's had a lot of benefits from mindfulness, what it's done for them. Those kinds of things, to get people sort of warmed up to the idea before I start into more of the practice of it. Yeah.
Any other questions, Emily?
Not so much questions. I do see people talking about feeling overwhelmed by technology, especially because everything they do is in technology. So one attendee mentioned that they removed themselves from social media. It was difficult, but I'm a year in social media free.
Wow.
And Tonya did say thank you for some of your suggestions for her question for the juvenile.
I will say about, the removing yourself from social media. I think it's a great practice if you are able to do it. I'm actually on social media, mostly for work-wise, that people are interacting with me that way. But I see social media in particular, like the news is sort of its own category that I would say, I only read the highlights, right? And like I said, just once or twice a day. So I don't, unless there's something I really feel like I need to know about or learn more about, then I'll click on it and engage for a few minutes. But social media is a little different for me. What I started to do many years ago with social media is to only connect with, or so my feed, let's say, whether it's in Snapchat or Instagram or on Facebook or Twitter, any of those places, I have my feed very specific to things that are going to bring me joy throughout the day. So whereas a lot of people go on social media and it's like people are attacking each other and there's all this horrible stuff going on, I've liked or follow people or organizations that are bringing peace in the world. And so if I have the sense that, I want to check out what's, something on social media, it's usually if somebody I know who I love has posted something, that's when I'll typically go. It's sort of like a positive connection I'm making, as opposed to thinking about it as it's all, it's a terrible thing. I try to use it as positive connection throughout my day. And honestly, the stuff that I've connected with is mostly inspiring. So it's more of a positive experience for me, but I've done that very intentionally, and you have to be intentional about it. And literally, not necessarily unfriending, but certainly you can turn off notifications from certain groups or certain people or whatever. If it's not adding to my joy during the day, I'm very cautious. I'm very protective and intentional about about the input that I want to take in during a day. Yeah, it's important.
Very important. Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to touch on Rachel's comment here in the chat, actually. She says, mindfulness grounds me. I have a mantra of, you have to go slow to go fast. That sounds very familiar. I don't practice regularly, but when I do find myself overwhelmed, I shift my focus on one of them at a time. And that is so true. Rachel, thank you for sharing that. And I mentioned you have to go fast to go slow. Yeah, I've heard that before. Mm-hmm. I may just to share with those who are here on the call today, I've read Dr. Samuel's book, The Mindfulness Effect, and the many practices that she shares within the book are things that in the back of your mind, that you're supposed to do this. And it's just such a wonderful reminder of the things that we should be doing, not just for ourselves and not just to achieve success, but for those around us, those we care for, because it puts us in a space where we can more wholesomely give to other people and do the things that we really want to do and connect with our happiness. I think all too often, a lot of these things that are pulling us away and making us multitask, they do sap the strength out of everything. Dr. Samuels, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think that this joy piece, the happiness and joy, they're so critically important. So knowing that everyone has access to it, and I say everyone with the caveat that, there are some folks who, if you have depression, for example, it's harder for you to notice your happiness, right? Mindfulness for everyone really is a place of observing ourselves. And so we can notice throughout the day, even if there's only one or two moments that we find ourselves, even with a hint of a smile, or something made us laugh, or something that, that you put clothes on that were your favorite clothes, or you were cold and you got to go inside where there was heat. Whatever it is that has given you some sort of comfort and feeling of, even for a moment, a split second even, of calmness. It's the idea here isn't that everybody all day can do that, because, you know, that's probably not realistic, and that's not life. But if we can focus our attention on those moments that we do find joy, find peace, find happiness, and remember that, the thing that I love about our brains is that our brains don't know the difference between when something is actually happening or whether we're remembering something that happened. Which means that if we had a happy time doing whatever it is, or we're laughing or something like that, when we remember the joke or the funny time or the happy time later, our brains, our hormones actually behave as though you're experiencing it now. And so think about how much more happiness you can get if you were to extend the few moments of your day that you were happy. You can continue that. That's just a mindfulness practice, right? Of focusing your attention on the positive, on the good. I'm not talking about toxic positivity here where, oh, isn't everything lovely? I'm saying being intentional about, well, I had this moment of happiness and this moment of happiness and this moment of happiness throughout my day. This wasn't the worst day I've ever had, you know? Yeah.
And thank you so much for expanding on that. And I want to let everyone know this is actually a great time I'm going to pop in the chat, Dr. Samuel's, the Mindfulness Effect book, the link to check it out. I do have a question in the chat that I'd like to get to. Any specific suggestions to create a habit when the work schedule is long, fulfilling with students, but exhausting? First thing in the morning, or is it something throughout the day, or is it at the end of the day? What are some of the best practices for doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And honestly, it's what works best for you. So for me, right, I actually have a meditation practice that's part of my mindfulness practices that I have, right? And my meditation, I tend to do it first thing in the morning, just because it completely, no matter how my dreams have gone or whatever mood I'm woken up in or whatever, if I go right into my meditation, even if it's for a couple of minutes, some days I have a couple of minutes, some days I have hours, my schedule is different than most people. So I have a lot of variability in there. But even if, you've got to be up at 7 a.m, wake up 5 minutes earlier and spend 5 minutes just focusing on your breath, right? Calming yourself down, calming your parasympathetic system down. You can think about, what's my intention for today? Just to ask that question of yourself. And if you're totally calm, just notice what comes up for you. Maybe your intention is, I'm going to smile a little bit more today than I did yesterday. Whatever you would like. I want to be of service today. I want to meet somebody I haven't met before. I'm gonna, whatever, you can make your intention, whatever comes up for you. It takes a couple minutes at the most, right? If doing in the morning doesn't work for you, you're somebody who has to keep hitting the snooze alarm a million times. Maybe the morning's not the best time. Maybe it's right before you go to sleep, and your practice is to think about the 3 times during the day that you felt joy. Or you can think of 3 things you were grateful for during the day. Even if one of those is just the fact that you're here in this moment and you're able to breathe, right? It can be as simple as that. And these practices actually over time can literally change your life. It shifts your attitude, it shifts your mood, it shifts your interactions with others, as well as your own understanding of who you are, why you're here, what your own purpose is, and how you can potentially make a difference in the world. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. And there's just one more, and then I'll turn this over to Dr. Bakari for a few things. But I think it's relevant because as you're mentioning, maybe it's those 3 moments of joy, and this kind of ties back into some of the things that you've chosen to do for your social media feed. And specifically picking things that maybe are more inspirational to you, so you can focus your energy on that. But this is interesting, and someone seconded this question in the chat. So they've also done the same thing by really cultivating a good feed. However, they still feel overwhelmed by the sheer amount of really great content out there. I really have to turn it off for large chunks of the day so I don't spend my time looking at the great content out there. Any other suggestions for kind of, I guess, bite-sized pieces of that, or how to even embrace happiness? I know you mentioned it's not all toxic positivity. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so as far as sort of organizing your time, this is really important because it's how we spend our life, right? Your moments lead up to hours, to week, to days, to weeks, to months, and years all of a sudden. So this is how we form habits. Most of you probably know that it takes roughly 21 days to create a new habit. And so doing it for a week is not enough. You have to continue on for a few weeks. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, how did I function before this? I think about that when I first started meditating, and I started off 3 minutes a day. And I had an app where it was tracked every single day. And at the beginning, I was sort of like, oh, I didn't want to miss a day because the app was tracking me, and I wanted to make sure I got the point for the day or whatever. By the end of the first month, I could have kept going on the app, but I had so much, I could see the way it had shifted my life so dramatically that I was like, I never needed the app again. I never needed to track it because I knew there wasn't going to be another day in my life I wasn't going to have some sort of mindfulness practice during my day. And so as far as the feed goes, it's the same thing. It's deciding, okay, I'm going to check, and maybe you check your feed every 20 minutes or something. Maybe make it so that you're only checking your feed once an hour. Maybe it's, well, I'm going to check it 3 times a day, and I'm going to limit it to, I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes each time, or whatever works for yourself. But I agree, there's a ton of content out there. I could do content every day. I could give out content every day, but there are so many good places that are already having beautiful, inspirational content that I'm thinking, I don't want to necessarily add to that. If folks are, interested in what I had to say, certainly my book, you can read a couple pages of my book, in the morning or something like that, and see if that gives you something to consider. But there is a ton of content out there. And so thinking very intentionally about how you're going to limit yourself, I think, is important. It's a great habit.
That's some wonderful advice. Thank you. I have a very intriguing question in the chat here from, I believe the name is Imaginite. This person asks how to find or remember mindfulness when dealing with such an extensive process as the doctoral journey, coupled with life, the pandemic, and personal challenges and setbacks.
Mm-hmm. So your mindfulness journey is going to be different for each person. This is one of the reasons I also, with my book, you can also get a practice planner. It's called Journal and Practice. It's the Mindfulness Effect Journal and Practice Planner. And in that, you actually go through, there's 25 mindfulness practices in the book that it takes you on a journey to some degree. And after each one, you get to journal what your experience was. And also you get to kind of give it a score. I really thought this one was great. So on a scale of 1 to 10, here's what I think. And so by the end of the book, I invite you towards the end of this, the Journal and Practice Planner, to actually create your own plan that's specific to you. That there may be mindfulness practices in the book that were challenging for you, that you thought, I don't love this one, but I do think it should be part of my plan. And you get to pick and choose, well, this one I gave a 10, and this one I only gave an 8. So how much do I want to incorporate? So, in my future, now you've got a whole, really a knapsack filled with different mindfulness practices you can incorporate as you move forward. So you get to create your own plan for your own mindfulness journey. And part of that too, I talk about this in the book, is those moments in the day that ordinarily would be stressful, especially if you're a busy grad student or you're writing your dissertation or whatever you're doing, and you've got family and you've got life in general, there's so much how can you incorporate mindfulness in ways that are not only not going to that are not going to take away time from you. So for example, you're standing in line, let's say you're waiting in line somewhere and you're feeling impatient, or maybe you're stopped at a red light, right? And you're feeling impatient, like I need to be somewhere other than where I am. That's a beautiful moment, a mindful moment where you can pause and say, wow, I can't be anywhere than where I am right now. It's just focusing on that and realizing that most of our stress comes from wishing things were different than they are. And the reality is, as soon as we're accepting of the present moment, whatever that looks like, right? As crazy as it is, or as, you know, as hectic as it might be in that moment. Okay, but here I am right now. I'm how can I ground myself? How can I focus on my breath? We always say, mindfulness instructors and in the literature and everywhere else, it talks about mindfulness, we focus on our breath. The reason is because we'll have our breath until our last one. It's always an anchor. It's always something to come back to, no matter, sometimes we breathe quickly, we're fast paced, or we're frazzled in some way and our breath is not calm, but we still have a breath. So there's something about coming back to our breath over and over again, even if it's counting, which brings me to a practice I'm happy to share with folks if y'all are willing, that I call the 10-second vacation.
Please do.
Okay. Let's try it.
Okay, let's try it. Let's do it. So I'll take a little longer than 10 seconds, but once you learn it, I promise you can do it in 10 seconds. It's great. So the 10-second vacation is something where you are focusing on your breath no matter what else is going on. So let's just come into the moment. Again, if you're able to close your eyes, great. If you need to keep your eyes open, just gazing down gently. If you're driving, please don't do that, but just focus inward. And just notice your breath. Notice how your body is in this moment. Any discomfort, just notice. And what I'm going to invite you to do at your own pace is to inhale to a count of 4 and exhale to a count of 6. And they don't have to be seconds. It could just be whatever count you have, is 4 counts in and 6 counts out. And as you're doing that, I'm just going to share with you why this is so useful. It turns out if our exhales are longer than our inhales, it actually calms our parasympathetic system. As I mentioned earlier, it actually lowers our cortisol level, which is our stress hormone. It releases stress and it calms us down. So if you think about doing this, you're counting 4 on your inhale and counting 6 on your exhale. If you could do this at any time of the day, even if you're in the middle of a meeting. And what I love about that is that nobody knows you're doing it. And everything around you may still be as hectic and chaotic or whatever as it was before your 10 seconds. But you have changed now. Your focus has changed. You are calmer and you're able to typically see and think a little more clearly about what's going on. And you can be more intentional about how you want to move forward, whether it's within a conversation you're in the middle of having, or whether you're leading a room full of people. I teach it as a leadership skill. And it can be life-changing. It's certainly a game changer. So I'm going to invite you one more time. Just take your inhale, a count of 4. And exhale, a count of 6. And if your eyes are closed, go ahead and flutter them open. I welcome you back, and I'm going to invite you in the chat to just use one word to describe any difference that you notice from before you did this to after, like what your body is, there, if there's any change in your body, in your mental state, in your, just how you are in this moment.
This is very, very thought-provoking, actually. And we've had a couple of questions related to homework and to assignments, and particularly one that is close to my heart, and I do feel for this person. Getting over stats and getting through a stats course, because I know for me, when you're not a person who thinks in terms of numbers, the thought of a statistics course in itself is very overwhelming. And the person was asking about techniques that could help with, perhaps quieting that overwhelming feeling.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah. Stats there's so many stressful, we could fill in the blank here, if it's statistics or something else. I'm sorry to say, not sorry, but I actually love statistics. But I do understand, I know that most people who come into a statistics course, especially, if you're having to do statistics for maybe the first time, or you haven't been successful in the past and you have to take another course in it. Trust me, I've been there. But the idea really is knowing that you are going to do better. You're going to be able to absorb the information that you're getting more coherently if you are calm. So think about the idea that stress begets stress, begets stress, begets stress, right? So the more you can actually wind yourself up about it before it even happens. So the idea is, as you're signing up for the course and you already start to feel that anxiety, or you're thinking about signing up for the course and you start to feel that anxiety, I hear you, Emily, that you notice, oh, yes, this is something that I am in general anxious about, right? Just knowing, being that observer is actually incredibly helpful, so that you're not stuck in the emotion. I don't know if we have time for me to do one quick practice. Is that okay? Do we have time?
Yes. And actually, it's so great you're saying this as you're thinking about this. There's 2 things in the Q&A, and I do want to do the practice, but one of them is about how do I help be mindful with anxiety? And then the other one is, I just want to make sure we can touch on it, being mindful in the midst of depression. I know you touched on it, but maybe these tools that you're about to show us can help.
Yes, I think so. So it's a tool that it seems so simple, but once you get it, you realize what it means to be the observer that I keep talking about. So hopefully this is helpful. And I write about this in the book too. So I'm going to invite folks to, if you put your hand out, if that's available to you, to just hold your hand out and put on your hand, obviously from a figurative standpoint, any of the stress that you're feeling. Right, what it's about, like maybe it's statistics, or maybe it's, maybe it's that something's not going to go well, or whatever your stress is that you're stressing about right now, you put it here, right on your hand. And then I'm going to invite you then to bring your hand very slowly in front of your face, all the way to the point where your finger is touching your forehead. Hopefully you can hear me through. And I want you just to look out and notice that everything that you're doing or saying, or even thinking, is clouded by these stressors, right? These things that are stressing you out. So here's the mindfulness practice. I'd like you to slowly pull your hand away from your face and bring your hand back in front of you. This is the mindfulness practice. So you've got your hand in front of you. And now if you look around, obviously you can see and think much more clearly. So when your stressors are in your face, you can't see or feel or experience anything else but what's happening. If you can pull it away from your face, this is being the observer. They still haven't gone anywhere. They're still yours, right? No one's taking them away from you. You still have whatever processes you have to deal with that. And I offer many in the book in terms of healing. But just this idea of the observer, it means you're not stuck with this is all I can see. Now it's sort of like, yes, I have some stressors, but man, I've got some other great stuff going on in my life. This isn't everything. And just knowing that is actually can calm you down, right? Before, during, and after your stats class or whatever stressors you have. Yeah.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Emily, do we have any more comments or questions that we want to touch on? Actually,
Sorry.
there you go.
I'm sorry, I was muted.
That's okay.
Sorry. I think, Freya, some of as we've mentioned, just in general, when people have it, are they anxious about something, like, for example, the stats class, why do so many of us resist calming down, even if it's helpful? So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's such a good question, because a lot of people will say, you'll hear somebody say, oh, just relax. And you're like, when you're not relaxed and somebody says, just relax, it's like, are you kidding me right now? Like, you can't possibly be serious. You can't possibly be saying that to me right now. Like, that's going to do it for me. So this stuff is a practice, and the answer to the question, I mean, there's a million ways I could answer the question of why is that happening? We can talk about it from a philosophical standpoint of the fact that our ego gets in the way, and our ego is here to protect us. And so if our ego is protecting us, then it's going to make sure that, is going to ask, did we do this? And did we do this? And did we do that? Like, it's going to go overboard to make us even more stressed. Like, that's just what our bodies do. It's like our animalistic tendency is to, be hyper vigilant about all the things around us, right? And so that's part of the why. Why does this happen? Why do our brains work quite this way? It's actually a practice to do something different, and so that if you're practicing, especially on a good day or when you're feeling a little bit more calm, and you practice and practice and practice, that's when you get into those stressful situations and you remember the practice of, oh, I could breathe here. And I know I've been taught, I understand that it will calm me down just to take a deep breath right now. It's hard to do when you don't have a practice at it, if that makes sense. So I'll give an example of, like, here's what the process that my body went through. When I was going through some very, very serious trauma. And I remember learning this practice. And at the beginning, I found it very challenging to do. What would happen is I would tell my brain, okay, I know that you're feeling stressed right now. I know I'm supposed to take a deep breath, and it's hard to catch a breath when you're that stressed. But I would kind of force myself to do it because I knew it was a good practice to do. So I would do this over and over and over again until what started to happen was my breath started to, I'd be in a situation and I would notice automatically, wasn't automatic before, became automatic, that my breath would start to slow down, that I would be taking a deep breath. And it was only then that I looked around and realized, oh, I must be in a stressful situation. Does that make sense? So it used to be that I would be in a stressful situation. I had to force myself to breathe. Then all of a sudden my body knew it well enough to start breathing deeply and then I would be like, why am I breathing deeply right now? Oh yeah, this is kind of stressful. My body knew it. Our bodies know so much. They know. So I'm a social scientist. So I have that scientific curiosity. And as I started to learn that our bodies have so much to tell us, that I, especially in the westernized world, have only been taught to prize my head, my intellect. And indigenous and Eastern cultures, they all know, you look in, your body has stuff to tell you. And when we start to pay attention to that, it will I feel like the whole world will open up. And I do feel like we'll be not only more knowledgeable, but able to understand ourselves and how we can make ourselves calm. It's all about ourselves. If we are calm in ourselves, if we can find peace within, we're also going to find love within. Loving yourself is the best gift you can give to the world. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Samuels. And, I think just being aware and cognizant of our breath, when you mentioned, I know some people have talked about, how do they work through some mindful practices if they are dealing with depression or anxiety or just worrying about that stats class, whatever it may be, all the other layers of our lives at this point in time. It reminds me of when a child gets upset, and one of the things that we would do to calm them down is for them to think about their breath. Okay, let's go ahead and take a deep breath to help you calm down. And it sounds so simple, but it truly, truly works. And thank you so much for bringing our attention and having us think about that, and doing a few exercises as well too, to help us guide some of our own mindfulness practices. We do have just a few minutes left. I just wanted to see, just a reminder, please check out The Mindfulness Effect by Dr. Dina Samuels. And just if there's any other last minute thoughts you'd like to leave us with before we close out.
I would, I have so many resources on my website, whether they're specific to mindfulness, specific to coaching, specific to diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is all comes together in all the things that I do. I incorporate mindfulness throughout social justice as well. We've talked a lot about personal wellness today, which is great. I love it. And I just feel like there's also so much more. I do a train the trainer certificate. I have a group coaching practice. There's lots of opportunities if folks are interested in learning more. There's also tons of other books out there. As we all know, there's lots of books and resources available as well. And I have some articles and things like that on my website around some of these issues as well. So, and I have a blog as well.
Absolutely. I did pop the website in the chat one more time. I'd like to thank Dr. Marie Bakari for introducing me to Dr. Dina Samuels so we can have this conversation today. And I'd like to thank our attendees for participating and being so engaging throughout this webinar. We appreciate you as well, and hope that you were able to take a few strategies or tools away for your daily practice. So until the next time, I hope you all have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.